What's going on, 3DMJers? Welcome back to another episode of the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This one is a little bit different than our typical episodes, which gives you actionable takeaways for your training, nutrition, etc. This was actually originally recorded as an Iron Culture episode. That's my own podcast along with Omar Isuf and Eric Trexler. But it was perfectly suited for the 3D Muscle Journey podcast because we know you guys are fans of natural bodybuilding. This was recorded while I was here in Colorado visiting both Brian Miner and also Alberto Nunez, and we had a spirited debate for the podcast for who we thought was the greatest male natural bodybuilder of all time. So sit back, enjoy, and if you're a fan of natural bodybuilding, you'll love this episode. We today are going to be talking about natural bodybuilding because that's what we care about. And if you don't like it, well, you know what? There'll be another episode next week. So catch you next time, you hater. No, but in all seriousness, we have been having a great time. I've been down here, or up here, I guess. I'm coming from New Zealand. Up into the left here for a good week here in Colorado, hanging with these boys. And what have we been talking about? Of course, the sport that we all love, and that's natural bodybuilding. The three of us are going to be getting back on stage, probably along with a few other of the 3DMJ coaches. So we're really excited about natural bodybuilding. We found ourselves talking and debating about who in the male natural bodybuilding division is like the greatest of all time. We've been talking about some upcoming battles that are going to be happening this season. And it turned into basically an NBA-style ESPN show debate after Worlds last year and a couple times, here on this trip. And I was like, hold on, we got to save this for the cult. Because some people just don't know the depth of talent that's out there because there's unfortunately too many shows, and there's also too many federations, and there's too many eras to really compare. And shame on us as a collective community because we also don't do a very good job of record keeping. So what I hope for is that this episode can help people understand just how deep it can be, learn a little bit of history, and also learn a little bit about the kind of cool battles that are coming up in the future. So for those who don't know, I'm here with Brian Miner, one of the 3DMJ coaches.
Yep.
He's been doing his thing long before that. He has also began his career in bodybuilding back in 2012? 10. My goodness. I stole 2 years from you.
It wasn't much of a showing in 2010, but
that's all right. None of us do well to start. So Brian, if you want to give the Iron Culture listeners who maybe didn't hear your old 18 episode where we talked about progressive overload. It's been a long hiatus, but you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah. So give us a little bit about your history as a bodybuilder and as a fan and coach of natural bodybuilding.
Yeah. So I've been competing on and off since 2010. And I've done 3 seasons, 2010, 2012, 2017, and hopefully next year. But yeah, I've always enjoyed the sport. Started with the intent to bodybuild, got into powerlifting for a while. Still enjoy it, but I've been a fan of the sport for a long time. I'm not the history book that you are, Eric, but it's good. It should be a fun conversation. I think it'll raise a lot of controversy.
That's what we want. We want people to hate us, love us, and be addicted to the drama that is natural bodybuilding. I don't think they're going to care that much, though. But awesome. Berto, now I know that people know who you are. You've been on Iron Culture several times, but let's pretend they don't. Give us your resume as well. Why do you get to sit at this table and talk about natural bodybuilding?
I've been around the sport for a very long time. I think I have this just big fascination with where did we come from? What are our ancestors? And then maybe not beyond a certain era because you're much better at that part, right? Like you know who was doing what in 1940, 1950. But to me, once I found out there was, okay, you could do tested, untested. I was like, all right, there's something about the tested that appeals to me. Let me get inspired, right? Mm-hmm. And not necessarily because it's like I have to, be the next great thing, but because it is inspiring. Because all these people, they got great genetics, just it's bordering on looking human at times in certain images, but they didn't start out that way. That's not their baseline. they still made significant progress to get to that point. So, so to me, the sport of natural bodybuilding, I think relative to the enhanced side, it's like I hardly look at the enhanced side.
Yeah.
To me, it's a no disrespect. It's impressive in its own way, but it's almost like the geared or the equipped powerlifting.
Yes.
Where it's like, well, that's really impressive. That's a lot of weight. But when you see someone like we're discussing John Axe squat, you're like, this like makes no sense. Like this is a human like hydraulic system. So it's like a human doing that. It's like when you see anything world class human, like whether like we can't jump as high as other animals, run as fast, but when you see a human doing their thing, and it's like the peak of what we've been able to achieve as a species when it comes to athletics. Like it's captivating. And that's the thing about like natural bodybuilding. When I see that, it's like, wow, that's a human being up there. Like that's just a human being, right? It's like an equipped bench. It's 800 pounds. That's impressive in its own way. But someone similar dimensions who's doing 600 is like, it touches me somewhere else. So as much as I love competing and I am competitive and all that, I think long after my bodybuilding career is over, like I'm going to be just being nosy about it. I'm going to be a sports fan when it comes to natural bodybuilding. So
yeah, no, 100%. And I think a couple things, because I know you don't like to give yourself all your own flowers, but this is your WBF Universe title winner. That was the last time he was on Iron Culture. This is a NGA title winner. You have pro cards in 3 different organizations that you got in not your rookie season, but your first real season where you knew what you were doing, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think also to both your guys' credit is you've coached a tremendous number of athletes over the years. You brought probably triple-digit number of competitors to the stage each, I would guess.
Yeah.
I think about the number of athletes that I brought to the stage when I was a full-time coach from 2010 to 2015-ish. And I'm thinking, okay, they've got another 10 years in your case on that and close to that for you, Brian. So you're very familiar with looking at the physiques. And I think, Berto, I actually think you know the contemporary bodybuilding history from the 90s up for natural bodybuilding probably better than almost anybody I know, which is pretty cool, and some obscure ones. So I'm really glad you're here because I'm not going to be bringing up people from the definitely drug-free era. It's so hard to compare when the conditioning standard was that different.
Yeah.
You know, there were some notable standouts where I could guess, if we got them peeled, they'd be competitive. And maybe I'll bring up some for fun.
I mean, it's like Jesse Owens, dirt track, Usain Bolt. It's like both great, but it's very different context, right?
Exactly. And like there is actually a really cool sports science article where some guys tried to figure out what would Jesse Owens have ran on a bouncy track with the good cleats. And they're estimating it was a reasonable like 9.8, something like that. Which is amazing. But it's also still just an estimation.
Yes.
And I just like I don't really want to disrespect Jesse Owens. I don't really want to disrespect like Steve Reeves or some of these guys that were around before anabolics existed or were being used. So there's going to be 3 parts to this discussion. We're going to start with who we think the greatest of all time was. And that might end up exploding into a very long thing. And it might be all we talk about. I was going to give that as a potential outcome. But then we do plan to also talk about what's coming up in this coming year. Where we think some really interesting battles are. And this is just more of just our personal interest. This won't be debated. We're just kind of sharing cool stuff that's going on. And then finally talking about some things that could make natural bodybuilding better for spectators. The reason I say that is because of what you brought up, Berto. I think there are inherently different fans who watch like the Olympia and not that there's any crossover, but there is not a complete overlap at the Venn diagram. People who pay attention to natural bodybuilding and enhanced bodybuilding. I do think there are a lot of people who are not even that serious about their fitness who watch the Olympia. Yeah. Because it is a spectacle. It is very much some degree of almost like a variety show, like a vaudeville act, like kind of a circus thing. And I don't mean any disrespect by saying that. It is just incredible. It's like you don't see humans like that. It's the extremes of what's potential, even with the intellectual pursuits of man into chemistry, and I think there are parallels in strength sport as well. Like fans of raw powerlifting all lift weights because it's not that exciting to see. Like if you squint, oh, that's 4 reps, not 3. But it's the number on the bar and the fact that you also squat and you can relate to it. Either is going, that's inspiring, or, oh my God, that guy's squatting twice what I am at the same body weight. This is insane. Is this real? But those fans, a lot of overlap, but not precise overlap, let's say those who watch strongman. And it's like, did that motherfucker just pull a plane? You know, like that's kind of the same thing as when you see a giant move objects that should not be able to be moved by anything except, you know, machinery. Is similar to, I want to see someone who's 5'10", 300 pounds shredded on stage. And I think natural bodybuilding, raw powerlifting, those are appreciated in a little more of an aspirational and an inspirational manner rather than a sheer freak factor.
Yeah.
So with that said,
Well said.
oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that said, I think we're going to try to debate here and see if we can come up with, at the very least, our own individual top 3. We want to go top 3 or top 5?
I like Mount Rushmore +1.
Those top 4? 5.
Yeah.
And you know who
5.
else like 5?
There are 4 people on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, Rushmore +1.
For some reason, I thought 3 for a second.
Yep. So top 5, which is what we've established. At the very least, each of us is going to come up with the top 5. We may fundamentally disagree. I think we're going to struggle a bit on this one because we have been debating for years, Berto and I, on who's the best, and we don't always see eye to eye, which is the beauty of a subjective sport.
Yeah.
And Brian, I had to logic into accepting some of the things I said, and he did not agree even by the time I left, which just means he's logically inconsistent and I'm right. But we're going to try to get the top 5 that we all agree on.
Yeah.
I doubt that's going to happen, but at the very least, we'll have our own individual top 5 lists. Now, the way I've kind of organized this in my head, and to make sure we're having some fair comparisons, is I've taken some of the most impressive titles in natural bodybuilding, and I'm including people who have competed only across federations where they have similar requirements. So if someone has never competed in a polygraph tested, like 7-year plus kind of drug-free organization, they're not going to be on my list. And then that's not to say that they aren't actually 100% lifetime natural for all I know. It's just that, I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of the other subjective aspects of natural bodybuilding is some of these competitions, like the Team Universe, a couple guys are going to get urine tested. Another year, a couple guys might get polygraph tested. But there are a lot of Team Universe winners who also are WBF World winners, or OCB / previous IFPA Jordan Cup winners, or PNBA Olympia winners. And the PNBA largely just does urine testing, but a lot of them cross over and do polygraph tested feds. So I've got DFAC Worlds. I've got the more recent Mr. America, which has attracted a lot of the top talent. I have WBF Worlds. I have the Team Universe. And as well as other folks in the IFBB who's crossed over and done some interesting things. And I've got PNBA Natural Olympia, the pro title winners, and of course the IFPA OCB Jordan Cup. Now, titles aren't everything. There are some freaks out there who just have not necessarily won those things, and a few people I've snuck onto my list, but I've got a long list. I don't have necessarily a very clear top 5. I'm thinking about it. Do either of you have your top 5?
No, not clear. But I think it depends on what metrics we're using. So if we're going off of titles, then titles alone, just hardware.
Yep.
The person I would put at the top of my list might not be there.
Yep.
So
same.
How do you?
That's a really good point, and I'll give an example for the listener. One of the most decorated folks is a very, very good bodybuilder, might be on the list, but I don't think is the greatest of all time. Yoshi Moody has won 6 natural O titles, and he's also won his weight class at Team Universe. And I want to say he might have won weight class at Jordan Cup. And I could be wrong about that. And I think Yoshi Moody is excellent. But there's people who he's consistently had trouble with, who I also don't even think are necessarily at the top. Another example, who is on my list, but I don't necessarily think is at the top of my list, is Philip Ricardo Jr. I think the era he competed in, he brought a level of conditioning and detail that was unmatched. changed a little bit in the last 10 years. His structure is good, but it's not the perfect. And he is an example of someone who needs to be in the conversation on titles alone, but also just because of his physique. He's won the Yorton Cup twice, and he's won the Natural O 4 times, and he's also placed well at Team Universe. So both of them are probably like the top of the list, I think. Is there any other massive title winners you were thinking of?
Not that wouldn't be in the top 5.
Yeah.
Well, maybe one. Like Siobhan.
Siobhan has actually won, I think, 9 world titles. Yeah, so Siobhan Cunningham would probably also be in the conversation, and he's excellent, very, very good.
Fantastic
physique. And those all might end up being on the list, but I don't think it's because of their titles. Like the titles are because of how impressive they are. So, okay, Brian, you were asking what should the criteria be? In my mind, the way I was thinking about it, I kind of had like a threshold, like you haven't competed consistently enough or shown to me that you can bring it any time if you haven't won a world title. So if someone doesn't have the equivalent of a really top tier world title, I have only like one exception, and that's Mike Ashley. Actually, he technically does have a world title. He won the IFBB Amateur World Championships. We'll talk about that in a second. You're like, IFBB, I'll get to it, internet. Yeah, basically, if you're on my list, you've won a world title. But how many after that? That's inconsequential. Then it's about who were you competing against? Was it the peak era? What did you look like? And if I put you both at your peak against other people's peak, who would win? That's for me, my criteria. But we don't have to make that the criteria. And we can even disagree on criteria. So what do you think?
The way I look at it, if we're not using like a quantifiable scoring system for each of these categories.
They don't even use that.
And like just to drop
that's not true, they do.
But the way I look at it is sort of how I look at other sports. Like 2 decades from now, who am I going to think of is like the GOAT, you know?
Yes.
And so that goes beyond titles for me. So the physique has to be something very memorable.
Yes.
You have to consider both. And I think that's where we have some disagreements.
That's fair.
It's not an easy list to sort out, that's for sure.
Not at all. I think it's extremely challenging to sort out. Berto, do you have any system? I know you like to go by kind of feel on a lot of things, so you probably didn't think of a flow chart to develop your list. You're more so thinking of like who at their peak would be their best. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, no potential. Like if they would have done this differently or been in this era. So none of that. Just what they have, what they've demonstrated at their best. And I'm taking it from a betting man's perspective. Who would I put my money on? We have these, this group of monsters there. Who do I think is most likely to come out?
He's basing it off of the physique.
Just
which I think that's a separate conversation in some ways.
Because there's a few that I know I will have in there just because generally speaking, I appreciate certain aspects of this artwork.
Right.
And it could be something silly like I just really like this one particular pose. Like it's just it's just locked in my mind. But generally speaking, how effective can I predict you being?
Yep.
How minimally flickery were you like across your career? Who have you beat? Right? But also like just what's in front of me, right? And just trying to do my best to predict what these outcomes would be.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. In my mind, it's basically who clears the threshold of having done something notable in the sport, a world championship, and then after that, it's if I put you guys side by side, it's your best.
Yeah.
But that's a good point, though. If you're rarely at your best, if you had to have like the peak of the gods, and then I could actually see you at your potential, that does knock you down a bit for me. Like there's some people on this list who I think, oh man, if they had just brought peak conditioning, they could have been the best.
Yeah.
They're not going to be on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, think of like on the enhanced side, like Lee Haney. Does he still have the record?
He is tied with Ronnie Coleman.
So with that said, like I wouldn't, like Lee Haney obviously had a very impressive physique, but I wouldn't put him in my top 5 best all time.
Well, it's actually
if we're basing it off of physique alone.
So I think it's almost impossible to do this in the enhanced world.
Yeah.
because
The technological advancements.
exactly.
True.
It's and that's why it's like so like it's frustrating in powerlifting in the non-raw division. Like for example, Ed Cohn did get some of his records eventually toppled, but by people who had like much better single ply.
Mm.
You know, he was wearing ace bandages basically back in the day and no bench shirt.
Well, some would argue on the enhanced side, like the 90s, early 2000s was like the peak. And now it's almost, they're leaning into advancements too much and causing other problems.
Yeah, there is probably a threshold where you, like an era you can compare, but I would, with the enhanced side, with Lee Haney, you'd have to be like, all right, if I think Lee Haney was alive today and did all the things that the best athletes do I think he'd be at the top? And my answer is probably yes, because the IFBB is also another advantage, against the disadvantage. The advantage is it's so competitive, you almost can count Olympia titles because of the number and sheer number of competitors and talent that's there. While we're trying to look across 6 different titles. So I think we do have our...
I guess my only point was that the titles alone don't dictate who's on our list.
Yeah, even less so in natural bodybuilding. I think you could make an argument of doing that in enhanced and then just assume that if they took more stuff and better stuff and different stuff and timed it better and knew how to use it, that they would be at a similar potential as others. I think I have my top 5. Do you have yours, Berto?
I think so.
Hold on.
Yeah.
All right. Berto,
Go ahead.
Why don't you make it? Do you want to give them an order?
No particular order. I'm just gonna pop them out, and there might be some people who are there just because I enjoy their physique. There's something unique about them that has been not replicated in some way.
That's allowed?
Yeah. So I'll kick it off. All right, just because I left him off a list, and on a previous podcast, and the UK fans like really they gave it to me, deservingly so. I just found he was really cool about it. He was just like, oh, it's just, put someone on the spot, and there's so much talent out there, and he's never seen me in person, but so David K. Yeah, I think I've never seen him in person, but I can kind of predict what he's going to look like, and he just has this quality of muscle that like no picture in the world's going to do it justice. Like you need to have good seats, find a way to sneak into the pump up area and just be like, whoa, like this is just different. This is this much weight, this much body fat, but it's the density, the muscle maturity that this looks like animal muscle sort of deal. And he just has no gaps in his game. Like you can't count on him. He's one of those guys to get in his own way. He's not going to make a mistake.
He's very consistent. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So David K, have him. I'd say kind of on the other side, because he was too young to see him. Like we didn't get to see what he might turn into. That'd be Kai Greene, I think.
Yes.
Kai Greene, he didn't have access to a lot of the tools, and when it comes to information, from what I've heard, even like from economically speaking, like just putting scraps together and now his can of tuna that he can get free. Like,
can I act as a narrator here for a second?
Yeah.
So I know there's some people like Kai Greene. What are you talking about? He was second place at the Olympia. He's bigger than, he's a comparable size to Ronnie Coleman. We're talking about natural bodybuilding.
Yeah.
History lesson time. Okay.
By proxy, we beat him.
Kai Greene in 1996 won WNBF Worlds. And I want to say he was in his early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
It's in 94. He was either 18 or 19. He got his pro card. So that means he was, 20 or 21 and won WNBF Worlds overall. So that's polygraph tested, urine tested, the whole 9 yards. And once he'd done that, he went, okay, well, I want to go to the next biggest title. And that is he was looking to chase down a IFBB pro card. And he did that through the only drug-tested pathway, which is the Team Universe, which kind of stopped in the late teens. They still have the Universe now. But for those who don't know, the IFBB and the NPC, 2017, they split. But prior to that, that was basically the amateur NPC, the amateur arm, that was actually registered with the IOC along with the IFBB International. And if you wanted to send a pro team to IFBB Amateur World Championships, which is an IOC recognized sport, Bodybuilding was actually in the World Games until 2009, I believe, and got kicked out for drug failures. But anyway, World Championships and international IFBB shows were inconsistently drug tested depending upon the host nation. Okay. But IFBB World Championships is a drug tested, I wouldn't describe it as a natural show. Team Universe, probably a little closer to being a natural show, but still probably classified as drug tested. Kai Greene won his pro card at the 2004 Team Universe. And then he decided, now I want to be competitive as a pro.
Mm-hmm.
People probably didn't believe that he was drug free at that time, but guess what? His stage weight increased by literally 60 to 70 pounds.
Yeah.
So if he was on even a reasonable amount of gear, there's nothing that he could have done to actually put that amount of weight on. So that is the Kai Greene background. So we're talking about pre-enhanced Kai Greene. You see as one of the greatest natural bodybuilders of all time.
Yeah. There's so many. I love the shape of his lower body, how the quads tie in, especially from the side. I think his quads are among my favorites. Like side relaxed poses with low lats. I feel that if you are going to ride low lats, like they better be good. Like they better be really low, because there are some benefits to slightly higher lats in some cases, because they help with the symmetry poses in particular. But with him, his lats were so low and full, and it wasn't erector fullness like down the middle. It was literally lats.
A bat.
You can, the only real thing I can knock on him is, maybe his arms are a little underdeveloped, but everything from just the art he put out there to like when I think of Kai, it's like, dude, it's like you're an artist at heart. It's like you're on this permanent mushroom trip.
Yeah.
Like the way he viewed his bodybuilding was something that just admirable. It was his own twist on it. Like he's an artist, and it was just an extension of him. So amazing, like just athlete in and out. One that I'd like to meet in person at some point. I can't say that about a whole lot of folks, but he's one where, dude, I'd take you out of breakfast. Next up would be Martin Daniels.
Martin Daniels.
I think genetically speaking, he is probably the closest thing we have to Ronnie Coleman. When I look at like the amount of muscle he carried, I vividly remember his first pro show was my first pro show. I got last in my class. He won his class and the overall, but I had never seen anything like that. Like he had webbing.
2008 Mid-America.
Mid-America, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember like webbing, like here the skin was fighting for space, like with his pec right here in his trap. Just lats it, like they were pulling on the skin so hard that it looked like he's going to get stretch marks. But the thing that made him unique was like how small his waist was relative to how big his bone structure was. Probably the most developed, biggest legs I've ever seen on a drug-free bodybuilder. But it was that taper, it was that waist that it looked like it belonged on a lightweight. Mm-hmm. So Martin has to be up there. Only thing is he could always have gone a little bit tighter. But I know what those physiologies are like. It's like they don't give easy, right? His muscle is going nowhere, but like to get those type of bodies to be dialed in, it's a totally different experience. So okay, I got 3.
So when do we start interrupting each other and yelling? Because this is like ESPN. Is that something we're allowed to do?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Martin Daniels didn't make my list.
Oh, look at him.
Even though I actually think he is right up there in terms of muscularity and potentially at the top of the list, like you said. I remember when we did some of our earliest seminars when I was trying to help people contextualize what natural bodybuilding is, when people are starting to get a little incredulous as to what was possible. And I used a picture of Doug Miller and a picture of Martin Daniels. And they'd be like, no, who are these guys? And I'm like, they are polygraph and urine tested multiple times world champions. You're not going to get this. I'm not saying this is your natural potential. Sorry, buddy, that's not the way that works. This is an elite athlete. But this is, maybe take some blinders off and realize the human potential that's out there. You mentioned he has a similar kind of genetics as Ronnie Coleman. The difference with Ronnie Coleman and Martin Daniels is Ronnie Coleman was walking around nearly shredded all the time and had no issues with conditioning. And I have a really tough time giving it to Martin Daniels because he's won one world championship. And even when he did, he brought enough conditioning.
Yeah.
But if Martin Daniels, I will say this, I mean this is all respect, and I do think Martin Daniels is the man. Yeah. If Martin Daniels was able to overcome that and get shredded semi-regularly, and even just slightly more shredded, on the list, no question.
Yeah.
But I think the conditioning holds him back too much, considering some of the names that we're talking about here, like a Kai Greene, for example, I would say is just as muscular as Martin. Maybe not quite as muscular as Martin Daniels at his peak, but God, lean.
Yeah.
He may have ended up bigger than Martin Daniels as a natural bodybuilder.
It's hard to say, like 2004 Kai Greene would have been, let's see, if he was 1996 world championship, and that would have been, he was 21. So then 8 years, he was late 20s when he got his IFBB Pro card, which is pretty insane. Considering Martin Daniels, I think, won his world title in his 40s. So yeah, we didn't get to see a fully peaked out natural Kai Greene, which is insane.
Yeah.
So anyway, I that's the first person on your list I take issue with, Berto. Although I do have a tremendous amount of respect, and I think if we went just with muscular potential,
yeah.
Oh,
and symmetry. Like, I couldn't draw a better bodybuilder.
Forget muscular potential. Period.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You can't draw up it's probably, in my opinion, the most beautiful physique I've seen when it comes to just symmetry and muscularity.
His waist was just...
Every line, it's like, whoa, that sounds a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? There was this something else to see in person.
Yeah, that's fair. So that's three?
That's three.
You want to stop at three? And
Are those in order? You got to put an order to them.
No, not necessarily.
I'm in order for mine,
Yeah.
We'll work towards that.
Yeah.
All right, that's his three. He's got two more. We'll come back.
Yeah.
You got three, Brian, or should I do my three?
I've got three.
Let's go.
I think, and I'm approaching this again from the perspective of 20 years from now.
Yep.
Do I think, like, who am I going to be thinking of first? So Doug Miller. And I'll just say, I think he's at the top of my list. After that, I think it's very debatable.
Yep.
Doug, I think, has brought something that no other bodybuilder has been able to replicate. Like, he's very good in all areas.
Yes.
And I mean, there's like, not every body part of his is strong. Like, there's people with better individual body parts, but like the sum of his parts, he is the best it's ever been. And he hasn't competed as much as a lot. I think the last time he competed, 2014?
That sounds right. Well, no, he came back, and remember he won a regional NPC.
I thought that was 14. I think it was the end of the season.
I think you're right.
But he's won the Yorton twice.
Yeah.
Because he won it in 2014,
Yes.
didn't he? And then he won it in 2009, I
Yes.
think.
2009, 2014.
So he's got two world titles. Not as many as some. If he competed more frequently, I think he would win every time.
I would say that no one has more than two Jordan titles, though.
Not Yorton. I'm just saying world
There are people that
titles.
have multiple ones, but just to put it out there, he is, if you want to talk about titles, he is only one. He's one of a few people who have two Jordan Cup titles.
True. But his physique, I think, makes up for
100%.
I think Babacar is second or third for me.
That's it. Yeah, he's very impressive.
And then David K. So that's my top three. After that, I have, and I think K and Bob.
Should we stop you at three?
Yeah.
Do you got any issues with his top three? Or those?
I think, yeah, I guess I shouldn't say that's my final ranking. Doug is at the top, but Babacar and David K.
They're on your list.
Could
be
interchangeable. They're both.
I will say all three of those gentlemen are on my list. I am struggling to constrain it to five. I'm going to.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
But those are for all the same reasons I agree.
Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez popping in to let you know all about 5 of our free courses that you can take inside the 3DMJ Vault. For those who don't know, the 3DMJ Vault is our all-in-one video-based education platform for bodybuilders, powerlifters, and serious lifters of all types. It's essentially a place where we house and organize all our best information in hopes of creating our ideal future 3DMJ athlete or a future physique or strength competitor. In total, there are over 25 video courses in the vault, and it continues to grow every year since we started it in 2017. If you want to sign up to be a VIP member, you can make a one-time purchase to access every single one of those courses at any time. But if you're not ready for that just yet, we do have 5 free courses that can help you learn some key concepts and give you a feel for what our courses are like. The first free course most people start with is the Vault Quick Start Guide, which lays out our suggested order of learning for lifters depending on where you are in your training career and what goals you have at any time. The second free course is our most recent release, the Pro Bodybuilder Case Study. And in that one, Coach Brad Loomis walks you through a 3-year contest prep planning arc with one of his pro bodybuilders who also competes in powerlifting. He'll show you progress photos, spreadsheets, and all that good stuff along the way. Thirdly, one of our more popular free video courses is the Recovery Diet. And in it, you'll have Dr. Eric Helms teach you how we have our dieting athletes exit their contest prep phases and return to the off-season in the most efficient manner possible. That one also includes a PDF download and recovery diet calculator made by Coach Brian Miner as well. And our 2 final free vault courses were each created by one of our 2 team's specialists. We have the Sustainable Fat Loss course by our registered dietitian, Steve Taylor, and the Blood Flow Restriction Training course by our injury reduction and management specialist, Dr. Nick Licamelli. You can become a free Vault member and get all 5 of those free courses by signing up at 3dmjvault.com. Just pick your free course and click Enroll Now to get started. Again, that's 3dmjvault.com to sign up and become a free or VIP member. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
Just to rewind a little bit.
Yep.
When we were at Worlds in this year, last fall,
To be clear, you go ahead, you speak.
I guess I don't want to misquote you.
Okay.
But you had alluded to the fact that Brian DaCosta was one of the best. I think what you were referring to was one of the best physiques you've seen. Is that fair?
What I was getting at is who do I think could win and would beat? But that is a slightly different conversation than greatest of all time. Because let's say Brian competes again his next season and he's off.
Yeah.
That is a mark against him in my mind, right? So one of the people I am struggling with is Brian DaCosta, because just looking at him, he kind of looks like similar size to Doug Miller, like actually the same height and stage weight, but just blockier.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hadn't seen him get as lean. And then at Worlds, he got as lean, and he stood next to someone who I thought was going to be the second coming of Doug Miller. He's just a little young, and he very clearly handled the other 2 people in the overall.
Yeah. Who were the other? It was Dirk, and what was the middle?
So the middleweight winner is Ben Schuster.
That's right.
21 was bringing the kind of back double bicep that we had only seen slightly less thick in Doug Miller.
Yeah.
And I actually thought before I saw the overall that Ben was going to beat Brian DaCosta. And it was a pretty clear...
It was a landslide.
Yeah, like Brian...
I shouldn't say landslide, but your eyes immediately went.
There was just no question.
Yeah.
He brought a level of conditioning that was sufficient. And the funny thing was that Frederick was basically like the thicker version of Benjamin, but not quite as lean. And Frederick was a very similar condition to Brian. And then Brian blew away him. So I'm like, okay, well, he would have obviously toppled Frederick. Like, this guy is a notch above these people who I thought would beat him. And his physique is one that, because it's a bit blocky, it's very, very impressive and big on its own. But you don't realize just how big he is until he's next to other people. And then he's making more symmetrical, more bubbly bodybuilders just look small. And those qualities are just not enough to overcome his mass.
Yeah.
So Brian DaCosta, I will say he could be the greatest of all time.
I agree.
But I need more data.
He's on a very promising trajectory.
Yes.
Not enough data points.
And that's exactly where I'm at with Brian, because you would have probably thought he'd make my list based upon the World
But
Cup.
last fall, you were holding pretty.
I
You
was
were smoking crack.
I would know. Last fall, I was saying he might be the best bodybuilder ever, but I'm not. But the greatest of all time is a definitive declaration of looking at someone's career. Yeah, right.
So you don't consider the best bodybuilder and greatest of all time the same thing?
Well, he would become less of the best bodybuilder if next year he competes, he's off, right?
Right. So you're saying he's clearly the best last year.
Yes.
Okay. But were you saying he's the best ever?
I don't know if he would beat Doug Miller side by side.
I don't think he would.
I don't think so either. Like Doug Miller he's more exy and slightly leaner, and I think at worst maybe slightly smaller.
Yeah.
But I don't think he would look outmassed by Brian.
So who are your three?
Okay, my three. Jeez, quit pushing me around here. My top three.
Well, just three.
I'll give you three. So Kai Greene is on my list for exactly the same reasons. It's just hard to. It's almost undeniable. Doug Miller is at the top of my list for the same reasons that you brought up, Brian. I think he's completely undeniable. I'll bring up a third that we haven't talked about. Rob Hope. Rob Hope is the only reason I don't actually rank him the same level as Doug Miller is we just have less pictures.
Yeah.
I've got maybe 5 or 6 pictures I can find of Rob Hope. They're all bonkers. There's that one iconic back double bicep.
Yes.
Where you think that back double bicep is the only one that can beat Doug Miller's.
Yeah.
But it's one shot.
It's one shot.
So if I had a side tricep, if I had a side chest, if I had all the symmetry around, it is possible that Rob Hope would be the best. But based off of the 5 pictures alone, I'm very confident he's on the
So
middle.
I take issue with that.
Well, you could be wrong.
By that logic, Kai Greene shouldn't be in the top 3 because we have so much. He was a teen.
No, I'm going off his. So here's one of the assumptions I'm making about Kai Greene, and it could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That once he jumped from WMBF Team U, he was still he could still have competed in the WMBF, but he was choosing to compete. I'm thinking he's an addict.
I just feel like there's limited data points on Kai Greene. I think if he would have
There's a ton of pictures of him in Team Universe.
at Team U, there is
Team U, yeah.
Okay.
Now, if your argument was, is he Team Universe natty or is he WNBF natty at that point?
How did he compare to when he was in the WNBF? His look
Slightly bigger. I mean, like he went from being 21 to 26. I think, if I had to guess, that he did not go half natty. He stayed natty.
Okay.
And then went.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. I could be wrong. I could be wrong on the data points.
And here's another pushback against you. You know what data point Rob Hope does have? He's one of a handful of people ever to have won 2 WNBF world titles. So Rob Hope won 2 world titles. Badal Khan has won 2 world titles. Babacar Niang has won 2 world titles. And I think that's it for WNBF world titles. Yeah, no one else. I don't think there's any male who's won 3 WNBF overall pro bodybuilding world titles. So I think that alone is just saying something for Rob Hope.
No, like for sure.
Like it backs it up that those pictures aren't just like,
I was just
good
pointing
angles.
out what I felt were inconsistencies in your evaluation process. But you know what? You cleared it up.
Okay, good. I cleared it up. So those Rob Hope, I think actually are my top 3, but I don't know what order. Rob Hope, Doug Miller, and Kai Greene.
We had mentioned Siobhan earlier.
We did.
And what does he have? You have the stats. Is it?
He's got 2013 WNBF Worlds. He's got the Yorton Cup 2017. And I think he's got a lot of DFAC titles.
Okay.
There may be another one.
He's very well decorated.
Yes. Yeah. Resume is
His resume is maybe top 3.
I think Siobhan, Kiyoshi, and Philip Ricardo Jr. might be our most.
And I think I'm trying to sort through this in my head because I actually love Siobhan's physique as well.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going back to just that, it's not like leaving a stamp in my brain,
Siobhan is extremely well-rounded, very, very impressive. I remember when he was placing 5th in a lineup where I think it was his posing wasn't quite good yet. We're talking like 2008 and 9. Remember that?
Yeah. Something even, yeah.
I looked in the magazine and I was like, this guy was 5th. What happened? It was like a hands-on hit most muscular that he hit well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw some other pictures like, oh, he's not that seasoned yet.
Mm-hmm.
But And back then, I thought this guy could be a monster, but that was also before Doug Miller came on the scene. So Siobhan he's chomping right at the... He's I wouldn't argue with him.
I originally didn't have him in my top 5, but logically, I think he has to be.
Well, here's the thing, though. People have beat Siobhan, though. So Cleveland Thomas.
I guess Cleveland is a great example.
Like Cleveland and Siobhan at their peak, Cleveland took him out.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Cleveland Thomas is on my top 5.
Interesting.
I think you could make an argument for it.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you guys. Do you think David K... David's a tough one because he looks incredible by himself. He's perfect symmetry. He always brings conditioning and super, super consistent. He's big. Do we think David K could beat Cleveland Thomas and Siobhan Cunningham?
I do.
I do too. Okay, cool. So we all agree that I think David K is on the list.
Yes.
Do we all agree that Doug Miller's on the list?
I believe so.
You can't not.
He's not in mine so far, but I have a feeling he'll be there.
All right. Yeah. We're going to talk you into...
Not in yours so far.
That's
so far, because I only said 3.
Well, the fact that he wasn't one of your 3 is...
I think he was just trying to be controversial.
Bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to be edgy.
Yeah.
He does that sometimes.
So here's one that I keep wanting to put in my top 5, but I think when it comes to peak, probably wouldn't be able to hang, is Philip Ricardo Jr.
Yeah. I kind of need to tweak my list, but
my list is
Philip initially was in my top 5.
Same.
And I think he structurally has some weaknesses.
Yeah.
He's not perfect structurally. His quads.
And we're talking at the world-class level.
Eric's getting mad because
Philip Ricardo Jr. is my aspirational physique.
Yeah.
Because he has done something, 4 times National O champ, 2 times Jordan Cup champ.
He's a legend.
He's amazing.
The reason I have him potentially in that top 5 is he kind of ran that first 4-minute mile. He is the first person to just really come in.
He came in right. He won the Jordan Cup right before Doug Miller did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't think Philip Ricardo Jr. can beat Doug Miller.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
And that's all up to Philip. But his conditioning.
But who can, right?
Yeah. His conditioning, it was something that had never been seen before. And
exactly.
I'm a fan of that side of the sport.
Yes.
So I have him in the mix there for sure.
Yeah, I would say someone we have to talk about, Brian Whitaker, the first person to have unified the title, 2015 Yorton Cup and WBF World Champ. He's an example of someone with very, very good symmetry and proportions, but no freaky X factor or massive amount of muscle. Just like very, very good at 2 things, symmetry and the threshold level of muscularity, but a conditioning that took him above and beyond everybody else.
Yeah.
And I would say if you look at Philip Ricardo Jr., he is similar in conditioning. Conditioning that's going above and beyond everyone else.
I think...
But I'll get there. Muscularity that was on par with the best in the world, but not as good as symmetry. And then not as good at conditioning as Brian Whitaker at his peak, but for the era of the mid-2000s to late 2000s, his conditioning was head and shoulders above everybody.
Yeah.
And it still would, I don't think
anybody's gotten leaner than Brian Whitaker from 2015.
I would agree. There are limits to how lean you can get. He lost all subcutaneous body fat, right? And I think Philip Ricardo Jr. nearly as lean, definitely in the conditioning top 5 of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way his muscle sits and where he carries body fat and where his vascularity is, the fact that he has massive glutes that are very delineated, and he has veins you can see from the nosebleeds in his quads, and very, very prominent abs, and he's just very, very thin-skinned. His conditioning is always going to look good, even when he's not at his best.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his era is playing a bit of a role with why he was so dominant. But I actually think if we're just talking peak physique versus peak physique, I think his structure holds him back. So he's not on my top 5. He was at the start, and then I changed it.
And with structure, again, this is against world-class guys because it's almost like I'm not talking about like your coach timed your 40-yard dash in high school. I'm talking about like legit 4.6 is a very fast person, but in the NFL it's slow,
Yes.
right? For certain positions. So he's got the gift of symmetry. It's just that other guys are even more flowy and musical than his physique was.
Yes, I would agree with that. All right. So I think we're actually starting to come to a unified list here. We all agree on David K.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We all agree on Doug Miller. You got a case against Doug Miller?
No, I think one thing about Doug, like, okay, I'll save my next two.
Okay,
So
go for it. Let's
so
get you.
because Doug is in there. Doug is definitely in there.
Okay.
It's crazy. So he's got a very similar FFMI to Lane Norton.
Mm-hmm.
They're about similar heights, similar contest weight. About
Doug's
190.
shorter.
No, Doug's shorter.
Doug's like 5'9", isn't it?
5'9".
Doug
Yeah.
is 5'9", Lane's 5'10" and a half.
So close. They're just like out of that. You look jacked because they're short, right? They're like right in that zone of average height males. But the difference, like what the physiques look like, just kind of go to show you that, like, wow, like Lane, yeah, you might have some haters that are like, oh, yeah, he's not natty. But I mean, these are.
Which I think only made sense in 2012.
Yes.
Now no one would question
Yes,
that.
exactly. But Doug is like, no way.
No way. Yeah.
No way. And it just kind of goes to show you how much symmetry, and symmetry, again, is not left to right.
Attachments and muscle shapes. Like his arm, it's not even the size of his arms, it's the shape of his arms. People are like, no, definitely steroids. And I'm like, don't think steroids give you different arm attachments. I understand what you're seeing. And yes, they're mind-boggling, but that's genetics.
Yeah.
Which people don't understand. Yeah.
Well, it's and there's a certain part about bodybuilding. Like if you're just around it long enough, like it's crazy. Like my mom has developed a taste for it. Like when someone hits a baseball up in the air and like you kind of know where it's going to land and you move to that spot, that's a pretty complicated physics equation, but your brain runs it really quick and you figure it out. And the same thing when it comes to some of the more subjective artsy, but there is a mathematical formula of some sort when you're looking at a physique. Like Brian DaCosta, what makes him unique is just like, I'm like, oh, it's like your clavicle length relative to your humerus, relative to your forearm, relative to how long your pec comes down. It's all these things, and your brain's like crunching these numbers and pumping
in the
this out
span of like 2 seconds.
very quickly. Like, yeah, I like that. I don't know why, but I like that, right? It's just pleasant to look at. It just sounds good. Same deal, right? That's what Doug has, and that's why his like 5'9", 190 something looks so different from Lane's 5'10" and a half, 190 something.
And Brian DaCosta's 5'8". I don't think he's quite at 200, but he might
somewhere in there, yeah. Right under 200, I believe. Right under 200, yeah.
Which is bonkers.
Insane. Dance man.
Although Martin Daniels, he might be a little taller. He's 5'10".
No, he's shorter than me.
Martin Daniels is?
Yep. By a smidge.
So the unfortunate thing, we've never seen Martin Daniels in true stage condition, but he competed at over 200 pounds.
Yeah.
He was like 210 at 5'8". Now, if he got as field as Brian DaCosta, I think similar stage weight.
Yeah.
But sometimes the numbers don't tell you everything.
No, they don't. They don't.
Again,
Like,
I do agree Martin Daniels, if he could be just like slightly better condition, would be probably the good.
It's still to this day across, you give me anyone in the IFBB, even in the Classic, it's the most.
But by the way, Martin Daniels, in his 40s, late 40s,
he's playing that game.
got his IFBB pro card, as still is drug-free, exact same stage weight, physique, everything. So he's in the IFBB now because of that. He's just the perfect shape.
Just the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard, like visually. Yeah, he's insane.
So we've agreed on David K. and Doug Miller.
Yes.
And who's your fifth?
Man, that one's hard. I only have one spot. Right?
We're gonna add,
but I'll go ahead.
No, let's each get our fourth.
Okay.
It is hard to get the fifth one locked down. Are you ready, Brian, to bring out another one?
My fifth?
You've only brought up 3.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
No, I'm having a hard time, and they could go in any order. The last couple.
All right, so I've mentioned David K., Kai Greene, and Doug Miller, and Rob Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because I dropped the bomb that I agree with you on David K. So I will put that out there. David K., for everything you guys said, yes, he's on my list. Rob Hope, I made a case for, and he's definitely he's potentially as good or maybe slightly better than Doug Miller if we had more pictures, but we don't. So my list also includes Rob Hope. So that means I would actually give you my last one. Should I be doing that? Guys ready for my very last one?
Let's do it.
All right. Babacar Yang.
That's your last?
Yep, that's my top 5. I was Mishak Ochieng is almost there. But I was looking at his physique and how he lines up, and I actually think you're right. I think his height does hurt him just a little bit. And the fact that Badal Khan has actually occasionally beat him, and Babacar has beaten Bada. And it's like, a couple steps removed. But when I look at Babacar, there's really nothing wrong there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that could be fixed, nothing that could be critiqued. And Mishak, I think his height also helps him. He looks like a ball of muscle, but the height also can hurt him against the taller bodybuilders who's fully.
Well, we saw that with Chris Nisbuga. We're like, why are you winning? Why are you winning? You look like an NFL wide receiver.
Yes.
But he was so tall and long, and like his clavicles were so wide that these guys that on their own look like Chris would have no chance against. Like Chris hits that last sprint, and you're like, oh my God. Like,
yes.
You look like you're his kid.
Yeah. That's. I think there is something to be said for kind of the Arnold next to Franco effect. Right? You look at Franco on his own, like, wow. Then you're like, you kind of look a little weird on your own. So, I was bouncing around who I wanted to be my 5th spot, and I don't actually think it's ranked 5. I don't have a ranks on these, except maybe Doug Miller or Kai Greene or Rob Hope in the top 3, which is not a rank. That's 3 people tied for first. I don't know. But I know that they're above the other 2 gentlemen. But so I got those guys, David K. and Babacar, as my top 5.
Are you going to rank them at some point?
I don't think I can.
I think you have to. I think that's why you must.
But the thing is I need to see some of these gentlemen against each other.
Yeah.
But you can't.
No, we're making a Mount Rushmore. That's it. That's the best we're going to do between us.
All right.
So my top 5, and I'm partially influenced by your case for Martin Daniels, actually largely because he wasn't on my top 5, but
I'm lean enough.
I have Doug, David K, Babacar, Martin Daniels, and then with the comeback, Siobhan,
okay. All right. So how can you have Siobhan on the list if you don't have Cleveland?
I like his physique better.
Okay. So his greatest of all time, like people who Brian like, basically. That's what we're going with.
Well, you said earlier, what was the comparison that Mishak
has lost to Bada.
His lost
car has beaten Bada.
Did you know? Did you know?
Therefore, it's okay.
So actually, I have Alberto Nunez on it because he and I both, and I'm just being humble, so I'm placing him instead of me, have beat Craig Toth.
Yes.
Who beat Kai Greene.
Those are
strong points.
But it wasn't Kai Greene at his peak. Now, was it?
All right. Yeah, I have my list.
So yeah, for me, I don't think Siobhan or Cleveland can beat any of the any of the gentlemen on my top 5 list. So again, do I think either one of them could?
But you're going back to like the physique alone. So why even look up titles if you're gonna default to that?
Well, they're all world champions. Everyone on this list.
I know, but so does Kiyoshi Moody's, what was it, 6-year run?
6 natural O titles
in a row
and 1 or 2 Team Universe weight classes. Kiyoshi Moody has lost to some of the gentlemen we're talking about.
Yeah.
Kiyoshi Moody lost to Philip Ricardo.
I guess what I'm thinking, I'm sort of, your pop fly analogy was very good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm crunching these numbers. I don't really have
that's okay.
Defined formula here.
Well, we're gonna argue until we get there.
That's fine. But yeah, I got Doug, David K, Babacar, Martin Daniels, Siobhan Cunningham, and that wasn't what I started with.
Okay.
But I think that's.
It's tough.
I think Siobhan got leaner. I think Cleveland.
I don't know about that.
I think he did.
I don't know about that.
I think smaller Cleveland when he was a little smaller was leaner, but 15, 14 onwards, he wasn't as lean.
Well, then even with Siobhan being leaner, Cleveland, he lost to Cleveland then, is what we have to admit. Because Cleveland,
When did he lose to Cleveland?
2014 Worlds, Cleveland won the overall.
No, but I was just wondering what year. So 2014?
2014, and that was one of the most competitive middleweight divisions we had. Jeff placed 4th. Jeff Alberts, shout out. 3rd was Levi. 2nd was Siobhan. 1st was Cleveland, and Cleveland went on to beat the heavyweight and the light. And I agreed with those placings. I do think it was tighter within the weight class than it was in the overall, though. That is one thing I actually thought is no one would have complained if Siobhan had beaten Cleveland. Okay.
Come back to me.
So
I don't get your hopes up that I'm changing.
that's all right. Berto, did you get your 5th?
Yeah, it was 3 people, so that were kind of battling for this one. Kiyoshi Moody, when he was at his like
Peak.
tightest, like also like from a leanest perspective, it was really good enough, and he had this huge discrepancy from a size perspective. It was really round,
Yeah.
and a lot of his tie-ins were very similar to Kevin LeBron.
Yes. His hands class most muscular was very Kevin LeBron.
The tie-ins between the traps, the shoulders, the pecs, like everything, the way it sat was just that one pose. Like he would sneak it in during front relaxes just to remind the judges, like, oh, like look what I can do.
Yep.
So he wanted to put him in there. Same thing with Babacar.
Yeah.
But thing with Babacar is that during a lot of his reign, the heavyweights have been kind of depleted.
Yeah.
Remember heavyweights at the Yorton Cup, and Martin Daniels lost that year. It was insane. Donovan Strong was up there at Abraham. It was like you swore the stage was shaking when they walked in, because they get more, you see the lights and you're like, whoa, these are lights. I forget what that looks like at this level. And then the middles, you're like, whoa, this is crazy. And then finally the heavies come in, you're like, oh my God, like it's you understand why, say like in boxing, the heavyweight division is the most prized title at the end, right? Because there's no weight classes in the jungle, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like here. So he just hasn't been challenged the same. And when I think of who's not going to get in their own way, like who's a horse I'm willing to take a risk on, it's Rob Hope.
Yeah.
Of all the talent in the world, but he was a nerd when it came to this stuff. So 5th place, my 5th spot has to go to, and it's not that he's like 5th in my list. It just has to go to Rob.
He needs to be on the list.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt about it. How could he not be on the list?
And he just had that look. Again, like Philip Ricardo. It's not like Philip Ricardo didn't look lean. He just looked like he had no body fat, like no cells in his body.
He wasn't born with any.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, Babacar has faced some pretty stiff competition. Maybe not quite the most stiff, but I want to say
He beat Kendall, but Kendall was like 22, 23.
he beat Kendall not at his peak. And by the way, Kendall probably should be in the
Yeah, you just mention him. It's there's so many guys we need to mention that.
So yeah, okay. So Kendall Richmond, obviously, needs to be mentioned.
His career's not over. Far from over. Yeah.
Some of the best symmetry in the sport. Abs tapering down, big legs. I think he needs to be mentioned. I think Badala Khan obviously needs to be mentioned.
Yeah.
And Babacar has beaten Badala.
Yeah.
Which and Kendall, like you said, not a peaked out one, but still a very, very impressive physique. There is, in a similar vein to Kai Greene, there are 2 different athletes. One I think that you made me aware of, and one I think I made you aware of, that are both IFBB pros from the 90s. One is Bernard Seeley. So Bernard Seeley won the 1992 WBF Worlds, and then he went on to win his IFBB Pro card at World Championships, what I mentioned earlier is a drug tested but not natural show, and he did okay. IFBB Pro, placing top 10, but in like the lower
Sometimes top 10, sometimes did not place, but sometimes top 10, 6 at the Master Olympia.
Yes.
5'8", 176.
Yep. So just think about what type of symmetry, and then look him up, Bernard Seeley. He's amazing physique. And I almost think that if he had been in the modern era and competed in these drug-tested feds, he might be the very, very top of our list. But we're thinking of him getting compared to the guys in the 90s, like Flex Wheeler, you know? So it's very challenging when he's being compared against people with similar talent to him, but who are also enhanced. The other one is Mike Ashley.
Yeah.
Very, very, very similar resume. He didn't spend time in the drug-tested fed ranks, but he did go the IFBB tested route. And the reason why I believe that he is lifetime natural, and he actually is drug-free, is if you look at his competition history, that he always claimed drug-free. And there was one very interesting incident. He also got his pro card at IFBB Worlds. His body weight makes sense. He was a heavy guy for his height, but nothing crazy compared to someone like a Brian DaCosta.
Yeah.
The 1 year where they decided to take the Arnold Classic and drug test it because they were having some of these issues, actually with diuretics and being very dangerous, he moves up from being middle of the pack or bottom to winning and beating Sean Ray.
Ooh.
So Arnold Classic, all of a sudden, everybody gets worse except for one guy when they drug test, the guy who was claiming natural. So I don't feel comfortable putting Mike Ashley on the list just because he doesn't meet the criteria that I started with. And Mike, if you're listening to this, I do believe you're a lifetime drug-free. It was great meeting you at NSCA. He's a student of the sport. You know, all the things make sense. Like he has attended FAU classes that Dr. Zerdos has taught to learn about programming. He still wants to keep getting better. He's a trainer. He's committed to the craft. Looks amazing, even at this, in I think his 60s. So like he has all of the qualities of someone who's been a drug-free bodybuilder forever. But I only know of his resume in semi-drug tested, right? But I think that Arnold that he won, that Arnold Classic title, puts him like he at least deserves an honorable mention.
Yeah, and honestly, it just gets to a point now where if you're around the sport for over a decade and you really love this, like I'll grant you some like natty or not goggles, because you at a certain point you can tell.
Yes.
Like there's this very like everyone, no matter who you are, you just spin around in a circle. I just see you in 3D. There's a point I'm like, oh, gawky, weird, stringy. There's a split second, Brian DaCosta, but I saw it. Like you look natty.
You got depleted.
Yeah, it was just one angle where the belly didn't look like like the equation of like pie. It's very brief. It's very quick. Some guys, real high level guys, like hardly have it, but you will catch it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this does not look I guess like inflated, swollen, bloated, almost sort of look. Yeah,
I agree with that. Another one you guys brought up who I hadn't really followed much, but I was aware of, Nathan Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Who I think you're arguing is probably the best person competing right now.
Oh, he needs just to get up there some more because
he's compared to like Brian.
He was great. And he's gotten better since.
Yeah,
he just had a baby. I know what that's like, but it's like, bro, get up there, because if there's one thing I regret, I missed competing with like the Cordovas and the Sean Claritas, and I should have just gone in there and like, let's do it.
Just don't there.
Yeah. So
for those who don't know, Nathan Williams, he's the 2016 DFAC world champion. One of the thing with the DFAC guys, like DFAC's awesome.
Yeah.
They poly, they urine test. They actually were started by someone who used to be associated with the Punch Fitter, a great organization.
And Vicky plays a big role.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, respect over there. The only thing is they tend to be a little insular as far as where they compete, and they're all like UK based. And I think a lot of the UK natural bodybuilding fans put them on a pedestal that is maybe, I'm sorry, UK bodybuilding fans, they haven't been tested against a more international field.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see that happen because comparison is so critical to deciding who's the best. Like, I would not be surprised if a David Kay or a Nathan Williams could jump into WBF Worlds and win, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
To add a name to that list, I don't think we've talked about him, Richard Gozdecki.
Oh, Richard Godzecki.
Yeah.
Excellent point. And you know how we were bringing up how Chris Nisbuga would just steamroll people, you wouldn't think about it? Yeah. Richard Godzecki looks like someone who's just been zoomed in on. And I think he has one world title.
He's got one. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
He's got 2011.
Yeah,
he's 6'1", 230.
Then he won heavyweight he won heavyweight in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, he's over 6 feet tall.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
And just very, very, very big. He didn't make a lot of noise after that era.
Mm-hmm.
And his conditioning was very, very good, but it wasn't insane.
Mm-hmm.
And his symmetry was very, very good, but it wasn't insane. But the size, maybe one of the biggest natural bodybuilders of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a freak.
Yeah, he's definitely a freak. I think he would probably lose to some of the gentlemen on our list from a symmetry perspective.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Just a wall.
Yeah, he's just, yeah, exactly. He's a huge, humongous, also from the UK, by the way.
Yeah, that's what
There's a lot of rare, very good bodybuilders coming out of the UK. Some other honorable mentions I think are worth talking about. Robert Thompson, he won the Mr. A, and he, you know what? Someone who's gotten close to the level of conditioning that Ryan Whitaker has,
Mm-hmm.
Robert Thompson. Like, when you see some of the pictures of him, like 'cause the lighting, like for the pictures from the Mr. A, the lighting did not do him justice. When you saw some of the pictures of him when he won DFAC Worlds, this is all 2023, and you're seeing cross-striated rectus femoris, it makes no sense. He was peeled. And I think Robert Thompson is very, 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 very good. He's muscular. I know he had lost a lot of weight because he got sick from going to Worlds. So I think if anyone saw him compete at WBF Worlds, you were seeing kind of like a very depleted version of him. But at the Mr. A and also at DFAC Worlds, he brought a package that very impressive. Maybe not the greatest of all time, but I think he's worth being mentioned, and he has won multiple world titles.
Where is he from?
I believe he's from the Cayman Islands.
Cayman Islands? That's what I thought.
Yeah. And so there's some very impressive athletes out of there. I'm forgetting his friend's name. Apologies, but the gentleman who won the amateur world title
That's right.
and ended up placing, I want to say, 5th or 4th in the WBF middle with me. He was also from the Cayman Islands, and I think he's either coached by or works closely with Robert. So Robert Thompson, very impressive physique, and definitely should be mentioned. Trying to think of anyone else on our list who we haven't talked about. Oh, Valentin Azuga. I think Valentine is someone to be mentioned. Incredible symmetry, maybe just lacking a little bit in the size department compared to everyone else. But he did actually win a 2013 Yorton Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Snuck it in on a year that Doug Miller wasn't there, to be honest.
Yeah. Probably smallest waist you'll ever see.
Yeah, maybe Nathan Williams, similar.
Yeah, just smaller downsized version of him.
Yeah. So, that covers pretty much everyone who we've brought up. Do you have your 5th yet?
Yeah,
You already mentioned.
I mentioned. I think Siobhan just made
Siobhan is your list, even though Cleveland Thomas had beat him in both.
I just looked at comparison photos from the 2015 Yorton, and actually, I don't know who won that. Well, I know Brian Whitaker won the show 2015, but it was a photo of it was Brian, Siobhan, and Cleveland, and
Siobhan beat Cleveland in that show, didn't he?
he might have.
It might have flipped. To be fair, I do think it actually flipped from Yorton to WBF.
It did.
But I just like, they're both very good.
Yeah.
They're both outstanding bodybuilders. I just like Siobhan's physique a little bit better.
All right. So we do have 3 people we agree on, though. Where are you at on Rob Hope?
I'm not familiar enough with Rob Hope,
Okay.
but I would need to see more photos of Rob Hope.
So you don't agree on Babacar for top 5?
I think Hope and Kai kind of edge that up.
Where are you at on Kai?
He's out of my top 5.
Not in the top 5. Okay.
It just there's too many potential questions.
Yeah. A lot of what ifs.
So right now, the only ones we agree on are actually David Kay and Doug Miller.
I think those are solidly the top 2, in my opinion.
Are you good with that? Yeah. All right, and folks, we've thus far only been able to agree on 2, David Kay and Doug Miller. I can't get on board with Martin Daniels because of the conditioning. I think that's too. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm a really good baseball player. Sometimes I forget my glove, and I'm like, bro. Now it's not like it's not like he's not trying, but I just can't get on board with someone who doesn't consistently bring a high level of conditioning. And it's because like we're talking about people who are at least getting a few glute dents, and Martin Daniels for most of his career didn't even bring a glute striation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's just, his freak attributes, even at that level.
I think he's just
so much.
I think it's just the bottom line imprint that he's made in my brain seeing his physique.
I agree. I don't know that we're going to get better than a top 2 that we can all agree on.
Yeah. No, I think
My list is Rob Hope, David K, Doug Miller, Kai Greene, and Babacar and Niang. And I some of them I could be talked on, but like I feel like Babacar would beat the people who are on your guys' lists.
I have Babacar on my list.
You have Babacar, but Berto doesn't have Babacar. He's fallen short there, and that's not something we can talk you into, is it?
No.
Okay.
You'd have to take Kai's or Rob's spot.
Yeah, you can't do that.
I think you can take Kai's spot.
How can you take Kai?
Because there's too many the Team U is, who knows? Like it's not as a strict drug testing policy. I'm not saying he wasn't natural.
No,
he's a genetic mutant.
That's fair.
But I can't base my decision off of
1996 World Championships, WWF World winner.
I know, but I've seen those photos, and I don't think. I mean, he's obviously ridiculous.
5 at the time.
Yeah,
too,
he's so young. There's other guys that would have beat him.
I you know who I could be talked into? Bernard Seeley.
Bernard, if you see him in video, he had that cockiness that we talk about. Like you could take anyone who sees a picture of Bernard Seeley, they're like, no way. And then if they see a video of him posing, they're like, oh.
But do you think you could be talking to him being in your top 5?
It's just hard to make this list if you're not heavyweight.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's
fair.
It
really is.
It takes a very unique athlete to be in the 170s. And
all right, folks. So guess what? I don't think we're going to get any closer than this. We have all agreed on the top. On maybe I don't know if I would put David K in my top 2. He's probably like, if I had to rank them, David K is not in my top 3. He's probably 4th or 5th. Like if I'm going to try to rank mine. I'm going to try. I'm going to do the best I can for you, Brian, because I know you want that.
I'm trying to give the people what they want.
Okay, I'm going to give you what you think the people need or something. In order, my top 5 are Doug Miller. No. Rob Hope. Doug Miller. Kai Greene. Babacar. And David K. If I was to bet, you talking about the betting man?
Yeah.
If I was to bet, I think Babacar might be able to beat David K.
Okay. My list, it's going to be Kai.
1?
Yeah, no, 5th. Kai's 5th.
Okay, we're going from 5th to 1st. Okay.
Yeah. It's the 1st. I think Kai, then Martin. I think even though he's softer, he's just, again, it's just symmetry that's from some other planet, man. You could tell he's 240, like you're 240, bro.
Sure. Yeah. I would imagine.
So Kai, Martin is 4th. Kai 5th, Martin 4th. Okay. I probably would have, this is where it gets incredibly hard. Just because I don't have enough data.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it transfers over his conditioning to that. I'd probably have Hope as 3rd.
I can respect that.
I need to see more, like the Hope photo I immediately think of is that back double
bicep. Yeah.
And that's like the most ridiculous photo
It's like
I've ever
Philip
seen.
Ricard.
Yeah. But I've never, but I haven't seen enough of the rest of his physique, like with quality photos,
That's fair.
And then it's going to be David K. or Doug Miller. And I really like those two because none of them is going to come off. Like whatever they did last time, they're going to get better. Like there's no like, Doug was a little off, David was a little off. That's just not in their personalities. Yeah. So I'd say I'd probably give it to Doug. I think Doug would edge him out.
Yeah.
The only thing it's like muscularity. I think they're pretty similar, but Doug's arm attachments are just out of this world. But they're very similar. I think conditioning, Kai poses his glutes like a little differently, but he's just as grainy and he has that animal muscle. I think it's the symmetry is close, is really close. David K's waist is smaller.
Yes.
But I think sometimes the clanging of the physique, like the noise, the lack of symmetry, is like that freak factor. It's like, oh, like whatever that was, the arms just make it work out. There's one thing to have like disproportionately like huge. It's like arms.
100%.
It's when you think of Arnold, what do you think of? It's like his arms were way bigger for the rest of his physique, and he's just a big dude.
Yes.
So I think Doug, just because we've never seen anything like that overall, like a physique and temperament, like those two things, he's going to be better than last time if he competes.
Yes.
Which is freaking scary.
Yeah. No, I think that's all very good assessments. So I found some more pictures of Rob Hope. I'm going to try to make a case here. Okay. Now you listeners are not going to see this. Not even you viewers are going to see this. But there's
The X-frames out this world.
There's that frontal bicep. This picture is a little far away, but it shows just how big it looks.
Yeah.
You know? So he had he can flex his abs down in a front double bicep and it doesn't lose anything. You know what I'm saying? And
Go to that most muscular right there.
yeah, the most muscular I got for you. It is right here. And the detail and the graininess in his delts, I think it lets you see that the conditioning that he brought from the back also applies to the front. And then, of course, his rear double biceps are just bonkers.
Yeah. That was guest posing, I believe, too.
Yeah, that's another thing to consider. Is it some of his pictures?
Is that him right there?
No.
No.
That's another thing to consider, is that there actually are some pictures of him where he was guest posing where he looks like he would be a world champion. So I'm not actually sure that I think that actually was Stain's condition. But
Yeah, he's.
can we talk into Rob?
I think I might be able. You can talk me into Rob. I'll bump Siobhan to 6, and I'll put Rob Hope at 5th. Actually, no, I'll put Rob Hope in 4th.
Okay.
So I go Martin Daniels.
Yep.
Rob Hope.
Yep.
Babacar.
Yep.
Kay.
Mhm.
Miller.
Okay. So folks, we've got our top 3 greatest of all time bodybuilders, and we have managed to argue about this to the point where we're actually not going to talk about the future. Maybe we'll do another one.
Yeah.
We can have a second episode. David Kay, Rob Hope, and Doug Miller, all 3 alive as well, which is pretty cool. I will give a massive shout out to all 3 of these gentlemen. I hope they hear this. We think among us, we don't have all of them in our first place. Actually, do we all have Doug Miller in our first place spot?
I do.
I have him. Yeah.
You know what? I'm actually more comfortable with that. I was looking at the pictures of Rob Hope and I'm like, I just need more data. And I had Doug Miller in second. So Doug is our first place for all 3 of us. For me, Rob Hope is second, but I can understand not necessarily putting anyone else there. David Kay, I don't have in my top 3, and I just need to see him against more bodybuilders. I'm not saying he couldn't be there, but he's on my top 5, greatest of all time. And we're peer reviewing here, subjective. David Kay, Rob Hope, Doug Miller. Congratulations, you just won the Iron Culture We 3 Guys Think You Were Really, Really Good award. I expect you to maybe take a screenshot of this YouTube video and maybe replace some of your world titles with a picture of the 3 of us talking. I think that this is as good as it
We need to send him a medal.
Yeah,
That's what we gotta do.
or at least a signed handwritten, piece of paper that says like, great job.
Jeez. Yeah, I'll tell you what, like this makes me want to play the lotto every week, because if I just come up on $30 million, I mean, I'm going to do all the responsible things, but you know what my side gig is going to be? We're going to make it so that talents like this, like they can all compete in the same place, because it's so frustrating. Could you imagine just like our top? Let's say we had a top 15 list.
Yes.
Like how amazing! Like they'd be up there for an hour to like sort this mess out. So one of my dreams at some point is, when I'm in a position to, I'd love to just have an unsanctioned show where like we draft you. You can be in this year. Okay, you come in. But that's in the future. But I'd love to just proudly show the whole world, like, again, like this is what the human body can do. Like that is a human long jumping 29 feet. Like that is what some people are able to do with their bodies. It's I'm partial to it. It's like art meets sport meets science. And at this level, it's hard for it not to touch you.
I totally agree. And if anyone wants to get a little bit of a historical context here as well, I did go through back in, I think, 2018 or 2019 on my Instagram. You do have to dig in the crates a little bit. I covered all of the drug-free era of the Mr. America winners. And a really important thing is sometimes we focus on Mr. America. Like now it is you have to be a WBF pro, it's an amateur and a pro show, but you have to be a pro in an organization to do it and to win it. And yeah, those are like peak of their career winners. Back in the day, the Mr. America was the highest level amateur title, and they would go on to do the Universe or go on to eventually do the Olympia. And in the I think I covered from 1953 or 54 all the way back to 1939. And there are some standout physiques where you look at and you go, God damn. Steve Reeves is one of them. Steve Reeves at his peak was symmetry on par with a David Kay, symmetry on par with some of the guys we're talking about. Not quite the same level of muscularity and obviously not the conditioning, but just an incredibly pleasing and beautiful physique. And then someone who I think is a little more built like the modern era mass monster freaks is John Grimmick, who won the 1940 and 1941 Mr. America. And they had to make a rule of saying, okay, you can only win the Mr. America once and you got to go on. He actually beat Steve Reeves in a Universe contest. So John Grimmick in 1941 was 5'8", 210 pounds on stage.
How much?
210.
210 pounds.
Now, granted, he was probably what we would consider, if I had to guess, maybe 10 to 15 pounds over stage weight, but he would have been in the 190s.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that year is that they didn't require the same level of participation in the weightlifting meet the day prior. So he let his body weight go up. He had been competing in weightlifting, and he was very seriously going after some pressing records. So he was constraining his weight.
Yeah.
So he was competing, I think, in the 190s in the prior year, and he was like, screw it, I'm just going to get as big, and I'm not doing Olympic weightlifting only. I'm primarily a bodybuilder. And his weight ballooned out because he was no longer holding himself back to try to get a certain underweight class overhead press title. And he went to the Olympics in 1936, and he was one of the lightest guys in the heavyweights, and he was pressing comparable weights. But anyway, I do think John Grimmick could have potentially been on this list if he, brought conditioning, was born in a different era. But he's like kind of the mass monster, and then Steve Reeves is kind of the symmetry monster, and I wanted to give them both a shout out. But folks, that's all we got, I think. I want to say a huge thank you to Brian and Berto for taking their time, for us doing our research, for sitting here talking about who we think is the male natty bodybuilding goats. And as you can see, it's pretty subjective. And that's part of what I love about bodybuilding. But we were able to get to a top 3. So big shout out to those gentlemen. Please at us, argue, yell, claim these folks are actually not natural.
Hopefully we didn't forget somebody. I'm completely obvious.
I lost all respect for your accounts.
I'm going to get at least those comments. Yeah. I guarantee you we did forget some people because there are like at least 600 organizations.
Yeah.
And that's
so many.
And there's eras where we just aren't as well read. I'm sure there's some people who are like, we're in our 40s.
Yeah.
Brad, are you 40 yet? Yeah. So we're old, but we're not that old. And we're also primarily aware of the American title winners. So there are probably some folks in Italy or Spain who maybe haven't crossed the pond, but are just slaughtering everyone in that part of Europe. Fortunately, those people don't speak a lot of English. So they're not going to add us that much. But no, in all seriousness, These are by no means a definitive list. We've done our best. And what we really want you to do, look up these physiques, check it out, give more shine to natural bodybuilding. And our community is one where no one's going to do it for us. If you're a part of the natural bodybuilding community and you're like, man, I wish we had more unity. Man, I wish someone would catalog all these winners. Man, I wish the federations would get their stuff together and be able to have a list of all the contest winners of every DFAC Worlds, Yorton Cup, WNBF Worlds, etc. I'm just going to say it. The federations don't do a good job of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I keep bringing it up. I talk to them and I know they're well-intentioned, but I am disappointed with the federations themselves who want their title to be the main title, but they can't even get a list on a website. Mm-hmm. So we have to do it ourselves. If you want to create some type of cool website or...
We need an open powerlifting for bodybuilding.
Yeah. We do. And there are people working that. We need an open bodybuilding where we can have like the title is won, how many people you beat, where did you place?
Like filter by show, see past winners.
Yes. And actually links to each one of those years, the stage pictures that exist. That would be an amazing thing for us to do. And it would make these types of podcasts far less potentially errored, if you will. What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you and enjoy the podcast.